Egan will share for around 10 minutes or so about his completed thesis, and then Janet, who is the SRC president, she will then give us some activity work. Okay, and then I will try to stick to the time. Okay.
I must push through this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So thanks, Seppo and Janet, for inviting me here. And just a little bit of an icebreaker, I think. Recently capped as a doctor, so still getting used to that. And graduation wasn't too long ago, a few weeks ago, and my family had come up from Durban. I hadn't seen them for a year and a half, I think, my dad and stuff. That was some sacrifices. And then my dad doesn't know what I was studying, so he comes up here and says, what's all the hoo-ha?
Most dads.
Yeah. So I said, I'm going to qualify and graduate. And he says, oh, what? So I said, no, as a doctor, So, oh, okay. So he phones all his family, his sisters, and tells them, oh, Egan is going to be a doctor, he's going to graduate. So my aunties all start phoning me now. Hey, congratulations. I say, yeah, cool. And then it's like, but I've got this pain. Something, where's this conversation going on, And they're quite old, they're in their 70s and 80s. And then they said, can you help? Like, I said, no, I can't help you. I'm not a medical doctor. I said, oh, I thought you were a doctor. I said, yeah, well, it's more an academic thing. I said, no, man, this doctor thing is a useless doctor. If you can't help us, So then that was like, oh, okay, people don't understand a lot of this. So anyway, so growing up, if you ask what a doctor was, medical doctor, I currently work for ESCOM, by the way. And if you ask me then, what do I know about ESCOM? You just put the switch on and boom, got lights, Never knew what happened in the background. So just a little bit about myself. 25 years I've worked in various industries, banking, shipping, construction. I started off as a construction worker, so basically with a barrow and a spade, and I worked my way up. So various industries, and multiple roles in those industries as well, And then I spent 5 years at SARS. That's the time when Praveen had come in at that time. I was part of the business intelligence unit. And that was my initiation into risk management, actually, at SARS. And then, about 10 years ago, I was approached by ESCOM to come and help them with their new build program. ESCOM had started with their new build program, the big power stations that were being built. And then, and I think considered still now, the largest energy build in the southern hemisphere. And I was brought in to help them to implement risk systems, project risk systems, specifically risk systems. And at that time, there was like a sort of big drive in ESCOM to staff up, ESCOM had previously managed mega projects in the 1980s. So from the 80s to the early 2000s, mid-2000s, we lost all that experience. So there was a big push to bring people into the industry, into the organization, to start staffing up. And that's how I got brought in as well. So that's a little bit of me, and that's how I ended up into risk management. So during my work, there were lots of things that I started noticing in ESCOM. So the first thing is, I'm sure we all know about this, the energy crisis that we went through in 2007, 2008. It was major, it was massive. We were told, and I'm not say it. We were told as ESCOM employees, don't wear ESCOM t-shirts, Don't walk out there with it. Somebody will clap you, if you're walking around. So as bad as that day. And leaving SARS and getting into an organization like this, and I had to keep reminding myself why I'd come there. But it was just to make a difference, maybe, to try and see if we could make a difference in what was going on, So that's the thing, the energy crisis, we noticed that there. And then projects, the space that I got involved in, projects are very difficult undertakings, especially the mega projects that we're dealing with. If you look at Medupi and Kusile, over 1 million activities. At the height of construction, you're looking at about 20,000 people at one time in one little small area. So all those things, it's not easy. Integration. And the other thing, is that projects are failing. And there's no resolution in sight, locally or internationally. Nobody can come with answers. But why projects are failing? We have the best methodologies and the best processes and the systems and the people. But what is it that's not allowing us to, So those are big things that came out while I was working. And also maturity issues. Remember, we suddenly started staffing up people. And, if there was a spare secretary, they said, "Oh, come, we'll make you a risk manager." Person had no idea, but because there's a gap and you need to fill this thing, they just started doing that. So there were maturity issues with regards to people, processes, and systems, major problems. And then we had competency issues in general in the organization, but specifically in project risk management. We had some big problems there with regards to competency development. We found that there was a major divide between the project managers, who were basically these old white graybeards, guys who've been in the industry long enough and very, very experienced guys, absolutely experienced guys. And then with this drive, we brought in a lot of youngsters into the organization, and it's mostly non-white youngsters that's come in. We've got no idea of what's happening. You're sending them on a 5-day course and saying, right, go and deal with these project managers. We got such a whooping there. Slot is sending these young kids to a slaughterhouse, really. I mean, it broke so many of them. And that's the reason it came from my research, and I thought, okay, what can I do, to sort of, let's see how to get this challenge sorted out. How do I help with this? Yeah, and that's why I developed this. So my research objectives in going through all that was to determine if there's a relationship between complexity that exists in the project space, maturity, and competency, to see if that really exists. If there is a relationship there, and does that relationship actually affect project performance? Because ESCOM, we're looking very bad, really. But it's not just ESCOM, it's a global thing. It's really a global thing. And so what effect does that relationship have on project performance? And finally, to build a framework for application. Because I didn't want this to be a theoretical thing. I actually wanted to build something that we could use. So that was my focus areas. Right? And then, I went through the whole research process and stuff, And then these are some of the findings that came out. So I said very quickly, I'm going to just discuss these things with you, right?
So you're not going to tell us about your methodology either? That's a joke. He said to me at the beginning, he said, I haven't prepared anything on methodology. Nobody's going to ask me.
I've got brain dead.
Just so you all know, he was told specifically not to talk about methodology today. So
it was an interpretive study anyway, So what we found with that, what I found through the research, and look, there's a lot written about complexity theory. There's a lot written about maturity. There's a lot written about competency development. And a lot of people have views about those things. But we've never actually brought this thing together to say, how do we bring these factors in, and how can we actually get this implemented in a project space? So some of the findings was that projects are complex undertakings. And what contributes to project complexity is actually the complexity of the systems. So the sub-elements of that, the systems, the management, and the products that you're producing. So the complexities in those things all contribute towards project complexity. And then from an organizational maturity point of view, it was the people, process, and systems as well. The maturity of those individual little things, subsets, contribute towards maturity of the organization. And the capability as well, because I was looking specifically at project risk management. And competency development, it depends on knowledge and experience. So it's actually theory and practice. And a lot of times we sort of get that wrong. We don't get the balance right. We either send the guys for too much theory and too little practice, or too much practice and too little theory, So that was a nice thing to find out. And then what I looked at was the bigger competency development proponents actually say that we should be looking at not just technical competencies, but actually now, because we're working in these complex environments, we should be concentrating a lot more on behavioral and contextual competencies, and not just technical stuff. Whereas previously everybody's been saying, get technically sound. But it's beyond that. It's beyond just knowing the technical stuff behind that. So it's engagement with stakeholders. It's a whole host of things, And then, I found that the complexity and maturity and competency working together in the project space actually doesn't just drive project performance. It drives project success. And that was such a epiphany, really, for it to come out of my research. And so through the entire research process, I developed a sense-making. I call it the sense-making, because I need to make sense of all these things. I mean, my research ended up at 450 pages. It was mad. It was really off.
How many Egan?
450. I had to cut it down from 700.
Oh.
Yeah. You know, and it was because there's so much. There was just so much. It was really so much to cut down. But through this, the only thing that kept me focused was this framework that I developed. I called it the sense-making framework. And if you see, I think it's on your first sort of slide on the top, where I looked at the relationship between so in complexity, the sub-elements were systems, product, and management. And you have to get an understanding of each of those areas and their relationships with each other to find out what is complexity actually in the project space. And the same thing I do with maturity, the sub-elements of that, and then look at those relationships between complexity and maturity. And it was a relational framework, if I can say, and the same with competency. And bringing all those things
I'm just
together.
going to ask you one quick question. Just distinguish for us between maturity and competence.
So maturity is how good you are, how developed you are in a process or a system.
Okay.
Competency is your skills and knowledge and attitude that a person acquires to perform work. And then you can go deeper in that. You have input competencies, output competencies, and competences and competencies, and it goes on.
Yeah.
So, but this picture kept me focused at all times, because I understood this is where I'm heading towards. I didn't know what the center part was, I didn't know what those things, but it kept developing as the research went on. And from the sense-making conceptual framework, I developed the next one, which is called the Project Risk Management Competency Framework, and that's the framework for application. The good news is it's being used currently in ESCOM.
Sure.
I'm heading up a sort of unit that's looking at specifically at competency development, and the framework is guiding the development of that of competencies in ESCOM. So if I just very quickly, if I can look at the Project Risk Management Competency Framework. So it looks like an Excel thing. So on the far left-hand side, you will see the competency elements of technical, contextual, and behavioral. And this is just a subset of the entire framework. The entire framework goes to about 10 or 12 pages on road, yeah? And there's various elements. So under technical, you'll see the next column is looking at the elements, sub-elements. And then I broke that down into roles, risk roles. So looking specifically in ESCOM, we looked at 3 specific risk management roles. So chief advisor, senior advisor, and then a risk advisor. And then I further broke that down into the types of projects that we're dealing with. So you have high complex projects and low complex projects. And the thing that we found with ESCOM is that on most organizations is they have this thing called a one-size-fits-all. So irrespective of what type of environment you're in, they just push the guys in there, And I said, no, we need to stop this, especially in the project environment. In ESCOM currently we have 25,000 projects. 25,000 projects, So it's a massive, massive organization, especially for projects. And then, so I developed this here. I looked at the risk roles, and then I looked at the knowledge and experience for each of those competency levels, for each of those roles, and developed a career path, actually, through this whole framework, that as a risk practitioner anywhere, not just in ESCOM, you can apply, we'll come to that later, but what is the path that we need to map out for somebody that's interested in risk management, and this, we need to put this out for them, so them to start following the career path through. So there are lots of issues we picked up, tried to develop this framework, and now we're actually applying it now. So I'm quite excited about that, So some of the recommendations that came out of the research.
Just before you go there, Egan, if you can maybe just quickly say to us, and I've heard a few things in what you're saying, if you had to point out the key principles in terms of the application. I'm hearing you saying effective career pathing. Okay, so actually create a path that says you move from here to there to there. So that would be the one thing. Also an understanding of the complexity of the different projects and effectively mapping competent people with the right
complex projects.
With the level of complexity of the project. Any other specific principles that you pulled
also
out?
maturity development, and the mistake, I won't say it's a mistake. The fallacy is if you have good processes and good systems, suddenly everything is sorted out, But if you don't have proper people driving that, the whole thing falls flat.
Yep.
It falls absolutely flat.
Yep.
So I've taken the other way around. And I said, you need to get good people. And those good people will develop the right processes. And they'll ensure that the systems you get in are actually world class. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So that's the type of things that we're looking at there.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's right, yeah. And so, yeah, some of the recommendations that came through was you've got to continuously enhance competencies, constantly. And again, it's not just the technical things. It's the technical, the contextual, and the behavioral aspects of competency. The use of traditional management approaches in complex environments don't work. The hierarchical ways, I am boss, I will tell you, it doesn't work.
To the work anyway. To the work anyway.
But that's what's happening, you know. You're taking these traditional approaches. Yeah. So the thing is, we need to start looking at collaboration and networking and trying to get people in and focusing on certain deliverables, you know, and giving everybody the ability to talk and express that, and to encourage innovation. So for a long time, ESCOM has been a very fat organization. And I think being very fat, I've got this theory in my head anyway. You want to get innovation, you staff somebody, and you see how innovative that person becomes. You become nice and fat and full, there's no reason to be innovative.
Yep.
So that's where we're going at the moment. No, that's okay. That's okay. So, but that's what we need to do now. And ESCOM is going through a very hard time at the moment. And I think that's driving a lot of innovation. So I think watch the space in the next 3-4 years. I think with sound leadership at the organization now, steering it in the right way and saying we need to become more innovative, I think we will turn the ship around soon enough. So that was the thing. And then career pathing, very important. You need to have defined career paths for project risk practitioners, and that is dependent on the complexities in the projects.
Right.
And strong organizational risk culture drives maturity. That's coming back to what you were saying earlier. Very important. If an organization bases their decisions or takes risk-based decisions, it drives the maturity of the organization. Yeah. So those are some of the recommendations. And then finally, I just said I'll add this here: return on investment. I spent so much of time. ESCOM spent a lot of money. Vinci so much of effort, and it was going on. So I said, what is the return on investment? You know. So globally, I contributed. Or the research contributed to a risk management body of knowledge. I presented the research, by the way, in London, and Paris, and in Dublin.
Awesome.
And it was really took quite a great acclaim. People thought, oh, you guys from Africa, what the hell do you know? And I told them, watch this space, man. You know, we're not in the dark continent or whatever, you know. So that was quite good. It was actually funny at the lunch break when I presented in London. You'd see these guys that you dream about talking to, David Hilson, Val Jonas, you know, gurus. We're actually running the enemy and saying, hey, can I get it?
Fantastic.
And I said, no, hold on. You know, so those are things, you know, it's opening up for us as well.
Yeah.
I think we need it's organizations like Da Vinci that encourages that, you know. For me, that's like powerful, So for South Africa, maybe a more reliable, stable electricity supply, and a higher investment attraction. We've been really catching a whacking in the last few years, you know. For ESCOM, lower levels of project failure, more efficient use of our resources, and I think the staff are better able to tackle complex projects, which is an issue for us at the moment. For Da Vinci, well, now they have a relationship with me, the researcher. So I'm quite happy about that. I'm busy mentoring some Da Vinci students. So one of your PhD students wants me to be their mentor. I said no, fine, okay. And yes, well, actually from next week I'm going to start writing articles and start publishing and stuff like that. So and then for the risk practitioners,
Steve will tell you how to schedule that and make sure that it happens.
Oh my God, I know. The slippage on those things, I know. So for the risk practitioners as well, what's in it for them? What's the return for them? Because they help me through this research, you know. So elevated levels of competency for them, increased confidence, so they can stand up and defend, you know, and then define a defined career path. And finally, for me, I think just greater levels of knowledge and understanding of those various areas or aspects, knowing a little bit more about the organization that I work for. My improved research and presentation abilities, and finally, I think the increased confidence to engage with people in industry, and especially global guys. Guys in globe, so that's good. It's good for us. It's good for the country. That people are starting to engage. And yeah, I've been pulled into various forums now, global forums.
Yes.
So that's what I'm so excited about. Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, well that's.
Thank you, Egan.
Yeah.
No, wait. I'm here a facilitator now. That's what I do in my day job. So I don't clap when I have people in a facilitation room. We do something slightly different. It goes like this. I go 1, 2, 3, and you all go hoo-ah. So I'm going to invite you to do a hoo-ah, because I was particularly sitting there going hoo-ah when you were talking about the global impact. For me, that is just so important, that we are producing things in Africa that are going to impact on the world. I think it's massive. So can we do this? Yeah. It's better if you stand up. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Good job. Good job. So we're doing something slightly different this afternoon, and beginning with me because I was thinking slightly differently. Seppo very kindly introduced me as the president of the SRC. I always think that sounds so ostentatious, but anyway.
It sounds so political.
It sounds so
Political.
terrible. So we're gonna actually the SRC are going to be given 4 of the Curiositas to run themselves in 2019. This is really a bit of a pilot because the program was already in place until the end of the year, but Ben was keen that we get this started. So we've literally just had this one little slot. And our emphasis is on, for me, what attracted me to Da Vinci in the first place. And that was the mode 2 style that we're all very familiar with. And there were 2 things I actually said in this very room. My first interaction with Da Vinci was Ben explaining mode 2 at a Curiosita nearly 2 years ago. And he said there were 2 things that stuck out for me. The one was the transdisciplinarity. And I think we saw that in Esther's presentation already. I think we're seeing it again in Egan's, and I'm going to explain that. And then for me, the second piece of it is that our work has to be relevant in the workplace. And my goodness, haven't we really seen that this afternoon already? And I think that's what is so powerful for me. So we're going to break into groups of 3. Literally, as you're sitting, just form groups of 3 or 4 if necessary. I've got a little piece of paper that I'm going to give to each group, and it's just got 2 questions for you to discuss in your group very quickly. Whoops, don't worry. And we've only got about 10-15 minutes for this, so it's not a lengthy discussion. And the 2 questions are, maybe I should just introduce one little thing, and that is that the SRC's claim to fame for this year is that we defined a Da Vinci student brand, and we're actually very proud of it. And this is the first time it's actually been made public to the people who are not on the SRC or class representatives. The Da Vinci student brand says we are remarkable, divergent thinkers who engage experientially to nurture awakening and foster brilliance.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Well done.
So this afternoon is about we are curious about the practical relevance of Egan's framework in other environments. So the 2 questions that you're going to just quickly discuss, 5 minutes on each question. When you listen to Egan presenting his findings, what work challenges do you think of in your context? And the second question is, how can this framework and Egan's findings be applied to solving workplace challenges which you encounter in your environment? Okay, so quickly get into groups 3. Egan, you can help me to stand these up. Just need 1 page per, and we'll let you know when you have to start. The hardest part of a facilitator's role is breaking up highly engaged conversations. It's really horrible to have to do that. That sounded like there was a good buzz going. So I'm going to ask 4 groups. 1 person, and I'm going to literally pick you randomly. I think I'm just going to ask 4 people to just say in 1 sentence what for you was the key aha that you got out of your conversation. Okay, so Matapelo, what did you hear? What did you learn?
So in our discussions, we actually felt like because of the whole young generations coming in and having people being in a certain role for so long, and there's a gap between that. But also there's a gap in saying that if someone with 40 years experience comes in, teaches the younger learner or whatever the skill, then what happens to another person. So if we would take this findings and implement it and employ the right people from an HR perspective from the beginning, it would create a better environment for everyone, and also creating a career path for people in the organization.
That was a really interesting theme I heard in a couple of conversations. The question of the older experienced members of staff, sometimes of a particular demographic, the young guns coming in, the problems of fast tracking. It was a very interesting conversation, came up in a few places. Wonderful. Brian.
Very good. First of all, just answering the two questions. The first one is absolutely the concept of risk management is, and then the ideas which were presented are applicable across industries and should be presented across industries. So we thought that it has scalability, to use a modern word, in marketing and products.
Yeah.
You can scale your product. Yeah.
Well, why are you saying that? The HS2, which is the high-speed 2 rail network in London at the moment.
Yeah.
So they're, I don't know what's the chairman or whatever, is running the project. He actually tried to contact me because he's heard about this, and they want to see if they want to use us or not. So I said, no, well, I come with it then if you want. No,
One other thing, a point which I raised with our group, it's called a little bit of amusement as well, was that we've got to look at, on a concrete point of view, is that there's a danger that too much obsession with risk management can stifle creativity and innovation. And we wanted to sound a note of caution, a concrete point.
Brilliant.
Charlotte.
Common denominator, people, and support required. Again, changing mindsets.
Fantastic. Awesome. And last coming from Mark.
So I will.
We've got to go back.
I will.
You're going to defer to Paul.
Defer to our community.
Our erudite Irishman.
I hope I summarize what we were talking about. When we answered the first question, what we were thinking about was how people deliberately withhold their knowledge, potentially for fear, potentially for career limiting reasons, and they won't deliberately pass the knowledge because then they might become obsolescent. The second challenge that we also brought in, because I have some knowledge of ESCOM, is the open war that's going on with the Chief Executive's Office, the EXCO and the General Managers, and you've got 400 people there, even for which this brilliant application of knowledge may not be enough. So we were curious, how could you engage with people in open warfare with a model like this? Was there anything else?
That's a good conversation. It was great time. Fantastic.
And he didn't answer.
Thank
You see
you.
that he was. Even if he wants to go to London.
Good. Thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the experiment, and that's simple.
Okay, thank you so much.